Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to our Tuesday talk. Glad to see everybody filtering in. I'm going to get started as we're approaching 12 o'clock right now. You've got Patrick and I here. I'm Kevin. I'm the curator of education at the Dar Museum. Patrick is the curator of historic furnishings, among a lot of other hats he wears from day to day in the building. And if you're not familiar with the Dar Museum, we're a museum here in downtown Washington, D.C. We're in the same neighborhood as the White House. Founded by the DAR, we kind of grew out of the collection efforts of the early DAR. Am I muted? No, great, fantastic. And many years later, we've become this beautiful museum dedicated to the American home here in DC. But beyond our sort of museum displays, we also take care of large portions of this beautiful building, including some old rooms related to the function of the DAR. So what Patrick is going to talk about today is the recent renovations to the Connecticut Boardroom, a gorgeous room right in the middle of Memorial Continental Hall, the original historic building. So during today's Tuesday talk, you'll see at the bottom of your Zoom screen the chat button and the Q&A. If you have a question for Patrick, he's going to focus on his presentation during. So hit Q&A and pop a question there, and then I will be able to help facilitate any questions at the end of the talk. If something emergent comes up, you'd like to put it in the chat, I'll be monitoring that. But I don't want to disturb Patrick when he's going through, and you guys are going to see some really cool pictures. I love this because I want to do a lot of behind the scenes stuff, and this is going to be very behind the scenes stuff of renovations to the museum. So I think that's it. If any problems come up where you're kicked out of the Zoom or anything like that, email us at museum@dar.org, and we'll see what caused that problem. And I think that's it. I think that's all the housekeeping stuff. Patrick, are you ready to take it away?
Sure. I hope everybody can hear me. Anyway, thank you, Kevin, for that nice introduction, and welcome everybody. So I'm going to just get started, and let me share the screen. I'm going to stop my video for the presentation so you can focus on the lovely pictures, and let's see if we can get this working. There we go. So again, like I said, it's a pleasure to be here today. And as the title suggests, today, and as Kevin mentioned, today I will be discussing the restoration of one of our period rooms at the DR Museum called the Connecticut Boardroom. This room is at the National Society DR National Headquarters building in DC. And it's called Memorial Continental Hall. And it was designed, this building was designed by Edward Pierce Casey and built between 1904 and 1911. The room in question today, you can see here in this 1911 photo of it when it was brand spanking new. The room was designed for use by the executive board. It was one of the most elaborate in the building. The room features plaster and composition decor in the classical revival style and is furnished with specially commissioned mahogany furniture in the colonial revival style. The room is lit with gilded bronze electric chandeliers made by the Horn and Brennan Manufacturing Company of Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. A wool pile carpet, Wilton pile carpet, and silk satin curtains in blue and gold complete the look. For those of you wondering, and who aren't in the know, it is called the Connecticut Boardroom because the DAR Connecticut State Society sponsors the room and provides funding for its decoration and maintenance. The Connecticut State Society also originally paid for the construction of the room way back in the early 20th century. So it was, like I said before, designed for the use by the executive board, and the space continued to be used by them until 1995, when they moved to another more modern space. And this became more of a period room type of space. This is what the room looked like in the 1990s. Sometime in the 1950s, the excessively busy bronze paint decoration was added. But other than that, the room basically remained the same, retains its original furniture to this day. although it did grow a whole bunch of extra chairs for guests to sit in during committee meetings, when they used to have committee meetings in here, when again the board used it, but that doesn't happen in here in there anymore. However, for years of usage and other building issues, the room suffered from a lot of water damage, as well as inept plaster and woodwork repairs. And you can see this in this picture here. The paint is falling off the wood trim, which had been coated with drywall compound, which basically falls off each season. Each heating and cooling season, the wood expands and contracts, and it all just falls off. So that was one problem. Here you can see a water damaged trellis, and also the warping of the wood frame around its border. And also some of the wood framing or paneling around the plaster panels themselves had been incorrectly replaced over the years. So in 2015, we gave the executive board a tour of the damage, and because they hadn't really been paying much attention to the room. So they had agreed after to their shock that this room was in need of repair, and also they felt that the room's decor, as close as possible, should be restored back to the 1911 look. So we're going to turn to preparation here. The first day of work began in January 2017 with this setup. After being cleared of all furnishings, mobile scaffolding was installed. All surfaces not treated like the parquet floor were covered with 2 layers of plastic sheeting and masonite. It took about a year, however, to get to this particular picture. First of all, we had to do a study, which had to be accomplished to see what was actually going on in the room structurally. And then based on that, specifications had to be written. And the specifications lay out the scope of the work for the contractor to follow. We chose our preferred building conservation contractor, Worcester Eisenbrand of Baltimore, Maryland, to do the actual work. And demolition day begins. In this instance, demolition is controlled, meaning that we only removed what was absolutely ruined by either water or bad repairs or whatever. What could be repaired or remained undamaged was retained and simply just restored. Regardless of this, regardless of whether it's controlled or not, demolition is always messy. This is what I call demolition corner. The northeast corner was the most damage to the room. And in both of these slides, the right-hand slide, you can see this is the lower part of the wall below the cornice that you see at the top. And then on the left side is above the cornice of the frieze. This is between the midway cornice and the ceiling itself. So the room is divided up into parts, kind of like a column. Anyway, this corner, since it was the most damaged, about 60% of the decorative plaster and a good portion of the woodwork had to be removed because the wood specific, the plaster was completely dissolved and just powdering, and the wood was actually rotten. However, removal of these decorative features reveals hidden construction details, which is kind of fun to see. In the right picture, if you look carefully, you'll see the structural supporting brick wall. So the building was built with the exterior walls actually support their load-bearing walls. So in this instance, this is a load-bearing brick wall here that the plaster was covering over. And the plaster had been attached directly to this brick wall, which is the traditional way of doing this. You can see horizontal and vertical dark strips, or stripes, I should say, called ghost marks that run along up here, run along these areas here, and they show where they were where nailing strips or cleats to which the decorative wood and composition moldings were secured. So those things were all secured as well directly to the brick wall. The dark thin slots that you see between the bricks, they're in these areas where securing wedges were placed. So these cleats were attached. The builders didn't drill holes through the bricks. They actually channeled out the mortar, and that's where they slipped in each of these wedges. The left picture shows the frieze, like I had mentioned before, just below the ceiling. The non-structural partition on the left, you'll see it's on the side where this bar is, where the scaffolding is made from terracotta blocks. Terracotta blocks were standard at the time and used like cinder blocks today. And of course, these are partitions, so they don't hold up anything other than themselves. Throughout the building, most of the internal partitions are built of terracotta. Again, ghost marks can be seen for the woodwork cleats and all that, and the holes again and in the terracotta, actual holes were made because those are hollow blocks for the wedges. This picture, it's kind of hard to see. It was hard to take too, but anyway, this picture shows what the securing wedges looked like. So you can see the wooden members of the framing, which is pretty much rotten, and the little kind of triangular projections sticking up are the wedges for that held everything to the wall. And of course, the wedges were placed in the wall, wedged in place, and then the woodwork itself was nailed, secured to those wedges with nails. And you can see some of the nails down here in the lower part of the picture. Selective removal we have selective removal of the damaged areas of the frieze in another part of the room. So wherever there's missing plaster, that was something that could not be salvaged. So the restoration contractor removed it completely. Sometimes down to the terracotta structural part, and sometimes down to lower layers of the plaster, because plaster is put up in different layers, and we'll talk about that later. Various portions as well of the ceiling needed to be removed because of not only of water damage, but also to expose piping. In this instance, air conditioning pipes here. These pipes were one of the sources of the problems that was leaking onto the ceiling during condensation. So in the summertime when it was on, so this system was abandoned in favor of another system. So we don't have that problem, thankfully, anymore. But removal of the ceiling enabled an investigation of the structure above. And so I was able to get up there with a camera and take a few shots of what was going on for record and all that. The ceiling is suspended, and today, of course, we think of suspended ceilings as the ugly acoustical tiles and all that. But at this time, suspended ceiling was actually a system where expanded metal lath was attached to securing bars that you see here, the gray, these gray steel metal bars support the whole ceiling, and those are attached to the structural ceiling up above, which is reinforced concrete. And then to that, the plaster is, of course, attached to or applied to the metal lath. The concrete also encases steel I-beams. So in the picture, on both pictures, you'll see you'll see a little extension here along the side of each picture that is lower than the concrete structural ceiling above, and that actually encases steel I-beams. That was done for fireproofing reasons. By the way, the black pipes that you see in the background as well, those are actually in the right-hand slide. Those are actually what's called rigid conduit, and they're pipes. And inside are it runs electric wiring. And in this instance, they supply the electricity for the chandeliers and any other switches in the room for that particular space. When being designed, the DAR ladies specified for the most modern fire-resistant building, so they certainly got that here. Now we turn to restoration, and with demolition complete, which took a couple of weeks, repairs and reconstruction can now begin. And this took a little bit longer. This took about a month or so to do. But anyway, reconstruction of removed areas was done in the traditional way. So anything that we removed because it was too damaged to keep was restored or reconstructed in the exact same way that it was constructed originally. So in other words, we didn't use drywall and all that kind of stuff to fill in the gaps. Instead, we used the same materials that was removed. So the new wood cleats you can see here in the left-hand slide were reinstalled, and the plastering again is done originally. It was laid directly onto the brick walls. And the left picture can be and also in the left picture, the plaster here is the scratch coat or the brown coat. This is it's called a scratch coat because it's got all these scratches in it, you know, there's these depressions in it that are made by the trowel, and then it will that's done so that the final layer of plaster, the smooth layer of plaster, or what's called the finish layer, that will be applied there, and it will just stick to it better. Anyway, and it'll bond with it better. Anyway, on the left picture, on the other picture, you can see the right-hand picture shows the application of bonding material in pink, although it looks like we're trying to do something modern. It actually is done in this situation so that the old plaster and the new plaster actually adheres together better and won't fall off. And this is a process that's sometimes left out. And if you don't do it, then the new plaster won't stick and it'll start to actually fall off. Or separate from the old plaster. So it's good to have this to make the bonding better. The new wood framing was made from paintable grade mahogany and mortise and tenon together like the original. The wood was primed on all sides for better protection. The right-hand slide shows a double tenon joint being slipped into mortise holes. As you can see, in the top of the right hand, you can just see the two tenons slipping in there. And on the left is the new framing already installed. Repairs to the cast plaster are also taking place at this time. On the left, Saeed is reassembling salvaged parts of the ceiling cove, as you can see here. When we removed the ceiling cove parts, a lot of it was salvageable. It was not, it wasn't deteriorated. So it was taken down as carefully as could be, and then it was actually reinstalled, and then missing pieces reconstructed when we put everything back. On the right side, we determined that the trellis panel that you saw way back in the beginning could actually be salvaged. It's a big thick of cast plaster, and I think what happened was the water dripped on it rather than seeping through it. So it only got surface damage. So these areas were carefully removed, and some of the rosettes had to be removed as well, and then it was repaired as needed. Some of the spandrel wreaths and ribbons were damaged and details obscured by the paint layers, as you can see here. And those of you who don't know, a spandrel is, you're looking on the right, on the left-hand side slide, you'll see an arch. This is an arch. I think it's over the mirror, actually, in that room with the fireplace. And a spandrel is basically a triangular area, you know, in each corner of the top of an arch. So we call it a spandrel, just in case you didn't know. And the right picture shows one wreath in the process of paint removal. You can clearly see how the removal of paint layers reveals the floral details, and it was quite revealing to see this because we were so used to seeing it gumped up with many layers of paint and all that bronze radiator paint that was up there. Castings were taken of this as well as other parts to replace things that were missing, because there were varying parts missing on some of these wreaths and ribbons. But here it is reinstalled onto a new plaster base and ready to receive the primer coat. So you can see it looks quite a bit nicer, actually. Replacement elements could be made in a few ways. This slide shows casting being made in a silicone mold. We had to be careful because, as you can see in the left slide, if we weren't mindful, these rosettes can multiply like rabbits, and so we needed a lot of them. So we made a lot of them, and so there they are. But once unmolded, the rosettes and other elements like these had to be cleaned up with different picks and other small tools to remove excess plaster around the edges and better articulate the details. Another method of making decorative molding work is called a running mold. And these were used, this was done to create long runs of molding up in the ceiling. Creating molding like this could be done in situ, meaning you could actually run this in place where you want it, on the wall or on the ceiling. Or you could do the work on the workbench, which is what was determined, which is how it's being done here. So the first thing to do this, a guide or a horse must be made, and the guide or the horse is the wooden part that you see being pushed against, pushed along the bench here. A profile or tracing is then taken of the original molding, and this tracing is transferred to a piece of sheet metal. And once trimmed, it is attached to the horse, and so you can see the shiny sheet metal in either of these pictures with the cutout of the mold, with the cutout of the desired molding. The horse has a fence that rides against the edge of the bench, which is then pushed over the length of the plaster being molded. Successive layers of plaster are poured over one another, and as the mound of plaster builds up, the molding profile eventually engages with the plaster forming the desired profile. The left picture shows the early stages, the early layers where they're just beginning to pour this plaster. This is a special molding plaster. And then you can see again, and then in the picture on the right, it's been built up a little bit more. And you can see it actually pushing away beginning to push away the excess plaster that's not needed. And then in these pictures, you can see how the molding profile is built up. and the horse as the horse is being pushed over the plaster. So on the left, you can see it's beginning to form the top part of the molding. And then on the right, you can see it's almost done in this picture. Probably another pass will be needed to make the final molded profile crisp and perfect. Just to let you know, too, fiberglass mesh is placed at regular layers for added strength, because this is a long run of plaster. Its weight, it could crack under its own weight when you pick it up. So the fiberglass mesh helps to stabilize it. And in 1911, a similar technique was used, except instead of fiberglass, jute fibers were used instead. So the completed molding on the left, after trimming up and with a piece of the separate cast holly leafage placed on top, just so you can see how the whole thing will look eventually. But on the right can be seen how the running mold was secured to the ceiling, in this case on a bed of plaster, and with wiring tied to the steel bars above. The steel bars, remember, you saw those in the pictures of the ceiling construction earlier. As previously noted, we decided to repaint the room in the 1910 colors. So the painting began, but in order to accomplish this, a paint analysis of all the surfaces had to be done, because you can't really determine what the paint colors are from a black and white photo. You can sometimes note if a surface might be gilded, but again, shadows can also play tricks. And also pictures often get touched up, especially if they're to be published. So, a publisher or printer will go through them and highlight certain things because it doesn't show up well or won't when it's printed. So you have to be really careful about black and white pictures. Even if they're clear original ones, it's still, they're great as a guide, but you can't use them absolutely, especially with color. So to accomplish this, we did paint analysis of all the surfaces, and our architectural conservator, Amy Hollis of Worcester Eisenbrand, did this, and she spent a number of days going through the room, making what she calls little craters or little teeny tiny holes in the plaster here and there to get cross sections of the different paint layers that she then took to the lab and would analyze them under the microscope. Amy found that in 1911, the white was the primary color. However, the paint scheme was somewhat complicated because there were various and subtle white hues used on different moldings. The gilding in the room was a lot less than you saw in the first picture. The gilding only highlighted, was confined to just highlighting the flat portions of moldings. And then to help the painters along, Amy devised these drawings, which indicated not only where the colors were to go, but also the finishes. And here we have Antonio Bonilla, one of the painters for Worcester Eisenbrand, is seen here applying the primer. And as the bronze paint got removed and replaced with white, it quickly became apparent that the removal of the busyness of the bronze paint actually allowed for the molding decor to show up better. So in the picture on the left, you can see a ceiling medallion, and that it was really difficult to see that there were actually husks and floral bouquets and all that up there because they were kind of hidden under the excessive paint layers of the gold. So with the removal of that, you can actually now, we began to see and appreciate these details a lot better. The same is true with the molded fruit and all that, and holly leaves of the border. the overall look was kind of like a wedding cake with different tones of white frosting, good enough to eat. I always think of food when I look at these things. Anyway, this look was popular for formal rooms during the 19 teens. And you see this kind of look played out in a lot of Gilded Age mansions, for instance, as well as public buildings like this. And remember, the gilded areas only define various architectural segments. So you can see it's beginning to apply the gold here, and it's again only to the flat areas or the fillets of moldings. Here, Amy is applying gold stars. Unfortunately, budget limitations would not allow for actual gilding. So we used a gold paint that doesn't tarnish up like and turn green like the bronze paint from before did. But if funds ever became available, we could have the gold leaf applied in these places, and it would be relatively easy to do. Although nothing's ever easy, but it's, you know, everything would be ready for it. So here we go. The painting process, like I said before, took many weeks and it was tedious. Here we see the Bonilla brothers of Worcester Eisenbrand. Left to right is Antonio, middle Charo, and all the way over on the right is Oscar. They're busily applying the finish coats to the various parts of the room. And it really came together very nicely as they were completing this. And so finally, in this instance, here's the completed room. And I'm sure you'll agree it looks a lot better. Again, the subtle period paint schemes enhance the architectural detail. And this is the other side of the room as well. So the next item on the list for consideration was the floor. And the Connecticut Boardroom floor is the only space left in Memorial Continental Hall that still retains its original white oak parquet flooring. It is also the most elaborate floor in the building, no surprise considering its high-ranking status. The French design of the floor features a basket weave pattern set in diamond panels with interconnecting borders. With the carpet removed, you can see how discolored the finish had become around the room's perimeter. There was also water staining here from our Happy Dappy leaks as well. The goal of this was to restore the floor to a period color and finish, but retain as much of the original as possible. Universal Floors Incorporated of Washington, D.C. did the work. Thankfully, the floor was in excellent structural condition and hadn't been worn down through heavy sanding from previous refinishings. Removal of the top surface was done with a special sanding machine that only removed the stain layer. And then we see Universal President Sprig Lynn here operating this special HEPA filtered sander. The right photo shows the special circular sanders that rotated independently as they were passed over the parquetry, thus evenly sanding the surface. Rotating pads are important in this process because wood grain goes in many different directions. And so a circular motion compensates for these differences and does not result in scraping, tear out, or excessive abrading of the wood. And in fact, we found that a previous, earlier sanding had just used a regular belt sander, and they just went from one side of the room to the other, and actually it scraped into the floors very badly in a couple of places. But thankfully, this removed a lot of that. And so with the floor staining, with the removal of the old stain complete, and it took out so little, took off so little of the top surface that there was no dust created, which was very surprising. We had spent a lot of time covering the chandeliers and other surfaces, and there was absolutely no dust. There were no dust. Better safe than sorry, but it was nice to see that. But anyway, with the removal of the old complete, the floor was extensively cleaned and dusted first, as you can see here. Sprig is doing this on the left. And the color decided upon is a traditional mid-toned hue that enhances the quartered white oak graining. On the right, Santos Cabarro is applying the finish with a squeegee, which the finish is actually liquefied tinted wax. Application of the color progressed very quickly. As it was applied, a buffing machine was passed over to distribute the wax and help set it in place, as well as to polish the surface to a soft sheen. The completed floor, after the application of a protective clear wax coating, can be seen here. The French parquet is looking very nicely indeed. And this was the shortest part of the whole project. This took a week to do, so it was quite amazing. But again, the floor did not require any major reconstruction or repairs, so we were very lucky in that regard. I think the carpet kind of protects it as well, because the carpet that's in there, you normally completely, covers 3/4 of the floor. So now we turn to curtains. And this, of course, was the final piece of the whole restoration of the room. Historically, there had always been curtains in this room. They changed about every 20 years. No surprise. Most of the curtains at the windows were silk, and pollutants and other issues would make them deteriorate, and so they would have to be replaced. And also, there's fashion changes and different groups. Boards want things to look a different way, so that was another consideration. But anyway, the right side of the picture shows the original 1911 curtains, which, like I mentioned earlier, were built blue silk satin, edged with elaborate navy blue and gold fringe, tassels and tapes, and it was all done to match the carpet that's in the room, which is a very dark navy blue with different tones of gold in the border. And then there were lace window curtains with a star pattern that also hung at the windows. The left picture shows the 1990 curtains made from something synthetic and looking more like a hotel ballroom, in my opinion. So away with that. And originally we had contemplated recreating the original curtains that you just saw, but the budget proved too limited for that, mostly because there was an awful lot of labor to sew up all of that special design, and also there was an awful lot of trim that had to be made, and trim can be more expensive than the actual fabric, depending upon what you choose. So a second option was found, in this instance, from the living hall of the Frick House in New York City. The velvet drapery treatment of the arched windows provided the correct period look for our room here at the DAR. I was looking for something that related to an arched window, and arched windows are difficult sometimes to drape up. So this provided the nicest option that I saw. On the right is a detail of the elaborate trim that's on the windows at the Frick in the Frick mansion. And this picture, this black and white picture on the right of the fringe, is actually a picture from the 1960s. They had it all recreated in the 1960s. Probably because the original had again, it was silk. It's all silk, and it just deteriorated. With the frick curtains in mind, the proposed drawing was made. You can see this on the left, and a reproduction of late 17th century arabesque design fabric was chosen, which can be seen in the picture on the right. This is not the color. This was just sent for us to look at and see the actual design, because you see it in online or in a book. But it's better to have the manufacturer send you a trial like this, a full-sized one with the full repeat of the design, so you can get a sense if it will. You can get a sense to see if it will actually work. And in fact, it did. And this particular fabric is it's wool velvet, and it was made in France with the design impressed or goffaged into the surface with heated metal plates. The company who made this, Bonvalet, I apologize for my French, it's not very good, has been making impressed velvet since the 18th century. We also decided to reuse the arched valances. Why remake them if we're gonna, they provided what we needed, thankfully. But surprisingly, upon the removal of the 1990s fabric, it was found that an older valance dating to the 1950s had been reused. So it had some history in the building, which was kind of nice. And then a new plywood front panel was added for stability. An exciting day at the museum. After 4 years, yes, 4 years, the fabric and trim arrived, and the trim and tassels were inspired by those, again, from this frick collection, but we didn't slavishly copy them. So just in case you want to know, on the far left, that's a tassel, it's a tie back. In the middle are the short kind of frizzle drops. That would be for those were going to edge the valances, and the wider one on the taller one on the far right. Those are also going to edge the valances, again for financial, for limitation of budget. We couldn't do fringe for the drapes and all that because trim like this is you can just about guess it's very expensive. And the drapes also arrived, which was an exciting day too. And here you can see the drapes and the actual color that was decided upon, this navy blue. And the whole thing is actually navy blue, but because the pattern has been impressed into the wool pile, it changes color as you move the light around on it. So at one moment it can look all dark, and another moment it can look kind of like a damask, like this light and dark. Installation preparation required that we reupholster the existing valances on site. So on the left, fabricator Celia Oliver prepares the velvet for cutting and sewing. And notice the fabric that Celia is cutting her pattern from. The fabric itself is pretty narrow. It's 26-inch width, which it's been woven in the period manner, meaning mechanical broad looms were not invented in the 17th century. So loom size was limited to how far the weaver could pass a shuttle from one side to the other. And 26 inches is generally a pretty decent size. There were no standards, but that's one width that was used. But anyway, on the right, our gift shop manager, Kara Bowick, who is also a professional seamstress and costume historian, helps us sew the trim onto one of the valances. Yours truly is not very good with a needle and thread. I can sew on a button, but that's about it. So this exercise required the help of those persons in the museum office who could sew. And thank you all for the for the assistance with that. And so installation day, yes, installation day came, and our museum preparator, Leo Sylvester, is seen here on the tall ladder installing the valances. In the foreground in the left picture can be seen the Scottish cotton lace curtains that will hang behind the drapes. These also have a star pattern like the original 1911 version. And on the right, of course, you can see the window treatment fully installed. So we return back to the 1911 view and compare it with the final result. Let's see if this works. There we go. Completion of this project took about 10 years. Although it really goes back even further because we started doing projects in the room even before that, in the early 20s and actually in the later 90s. But as with many projects like this, much time was invested in research, gathering the specifications and proposals, and most importantly, the financing. And to that end, I wish to thank the executive board under President General Ann T. Dillon, as well as the Connecticut State Society for their generous donations, without which this project could not have been accomplished. Truly, this has been a project, this project has been the work of many hands. And with this, I conclude and hope you enjoyed it. And if you have any questions, please feel free to ask. Thank you very much.
I got just a little emotional at the end thinking about how many people put their hands on this project, and I think that's something that I try to emphasize a lot about museum work is not just financially, but like the physical labor and the intellectual labor. It's so collaborative and so multifaceted, and I think it's great looking at this project that required so much physical labor, so much research, and that it all came together over such a long period with so many different people helping.
Oh, what did I do?
No, you're good. You can leave that up if you'd like. People can enjoy the final product. I know when I started, the curtains were not up. You know, obviously they went in this December, and I still walk in and I keep getting surprised. I forget that the curtains are finally in. It's always nice to see. All right, so I have a couple questions, Patrick, and then there's a couple questions in the chat. First, just a comment from Lisa saying, there's a fascinating tour of the restoration. Thank you for all your research and effort. From the Connecticut DAR State Regent, Lisa Mellon. So, can you hear me, Patrick?
Oh, I can. I can't. I can hear you, but I've got kind of a. I can't really hear you actually. We're in two separate rooms here.
Yeah. So, can you hear me a little bit, or you want me to come turn the volume up?
Yeah.
Okay, one second.
Sorry about this. I can hear some of the words.
I was going to be shocked that we had no technical issues. So
let's see. Let's see. Keep the door open.
Okay.
Maybe that way. IT. It works when it works. When it doesn't, you get frustrated.
So it might echo just a little bit. But Patrick, the first question here is, well, first off, Lisa Mellon from the Connecticut DAR State Regent says, thank you for all your research and effort. And then Rachel O'Connell says, which date was the project officially started and which date completed? What's the actual bookend?
What was the date that it officially started? You mean this particular part, or what, way back when?
The whole project.
The whole well, the project started probably back in '97, not long after I got here, and then and it was with a few repair items that needed to be done in the room, related to woodwork, but it really didn't start off until the 2000s. We had Jenny Renberg, who was a past curator general who got interested and involved in it, along with all of her state people in Connecticut, to start some of the repairs. And she was concerned with how it looked and all that. And then it really, in the 20 teens is when it really took off in regards to fundraising and all that. So yeah, I think the board helped a bit too, because the board provided the funding to do the plaster restoration and all that you saw, to get the room painted to look historically accurate. And that helped the Connecticut State Society, I think. It gave them momentum. Once the members, I think, in Connecticut saw what was going on, they were like, oh my God, we would like to help with this too. And since they do sponsor it, they stepped up and did their part, which is really very good. So it took a long time. It takes a long time. Baby steps.
So then another question from Alana Shuma, who says, the room is beautiful. Is there any plan to update the Connecticut room PDF so we can present that? So that's for us. Yes. Right now, Sarah Kurspel, who does a lot of the stuff for museum outreach and the correspondent docent program, she's going through every program and starting to update everything. It's a lot of work. It's very, very tedious. So you can look forward to all of those PDFs and the DAR Museum website, which has pictures of the period rooms to be updated with current high quality photographs, some that were taken just recently. So we're really looking forward to that. And then Cynthia Sweeney just says it's gorgeous, which is true. I love the Connecticut room. I have a question just to sort of, we get so many people who come to the Tuesday talks who have never been to national headquarters. Could you talk a little bit about how Memorial Continental Hall, how Connecticut is a unique space in that building?
Oh, hold on. I'm sorry. I'm just having issues here with hearing people. So you let me repeat the question. You want to know how Memorial Continental Hall was,
how the Connecticut Boardroom differs from other spaces inside Memorial Continental Hall.
Oh, how it differs from other rooms in Memorial Continental Hall. Is that correct? Yeah. Okay. Well, it differs in the sense that all of the Memorial Continental Hall was built as a basically as an office building, a very beautifully decorated and designed office building for the society's business in 1911. So, you know, the Connecticut Boardroom was the official boardroom. It was part of a suite of rooms, actually, originally, which included the President General's office, an waiting room, and they were all interconnected. And then there were offices for the different rooms that held offices for different, parts of the society that needed to do business, like the Treasurer General or the Recording Secretary General, the magazine, et cetera, all that. And then all the rooms all these rooms are built around a large center space, the auditorium. Originally, it was an auditorium, and that's where the annual DAR meetings were held. Today, it evolved. Because there was the organization got large, and the presence of office equipment in Memorial Continental Hall was not what the ladies wanted it to look like. They wanted since the beginning the public to come visit the building and admire it and all that. And so, but as an office building, it didn't work. So what they did was they built an administration building in the 1920s behind Memorial Continental Hall, which is where we're actually sitting in today. And they moved all the administrative stuff there. And then the empty rooms became the period rooms that you see today if you come to visit. So there are 3 floors of fun-filled period rooms that of course, as Kevin said, talk about the American home in varying different ways and times. The Connecticut Boardroom remained, and the auditorium that I mentioned before eventually became the library. So the genealogy library is there today because Constitution Hall, a much larger venue, was constructed in the late 20s for the annual meetings and concerts and all that. So, but the Connecticut Boardroom remained in use as a boardroom now it's slowly becoming more like a period room, so we can talk about DAR history and the board and how the organization is managed. For those who don't know, and even for members, because a lot of members don't get to come to DC and see their headquarters, but also members of the general public. You know, we can interpret that type of stuff there. So it's slowly becoming a period room, but it's gonna be what I would call a more frozen period room, in the sense that we're not going to continue to reinterpret it. We're going to celebrate it for what it is, and go on from there. And I think, and Kevin and the educational team will come up with some fabulous educational things as well to highlight all of that. So I hope that answers the question.
Yeah, for sure. Because when you come to Memorial Continental Hall today, you're going to see so many different examples of so many types of spaces. And Memorial Continental, or the Connecticut Boardroom, is this unique Beaux-Arts-based room, and is still modeled after its original purpose, which the only similar room would be New Jersey, right?
Yeah.
It's also, this room, as a fun side note, has been filmed in a ton. If you've seen Parks and Rec, Leslie Knope met Joe Biden in this room. Portions of National Treasure was filmed here, and House of Cards. This room gets sort of used as a stand-in for the White House in a ton of different films for the past 40, 50 years.
Mhm.
Apparently, an episode of the Gomer Pyle Show was filmed in Constitution Hall. I did not know that. That's news for me. So I had one last question, Patrick, to wrap up. We've gotten all the ones in the Q&A. I thought it was interesting that you compared the one feature to food. Is there any other architectural hallmarks that you think of remind you of food?
Everything reminds me of food. I don't know. It's just to me, these things look, these interiors, when they're done up properly, they look to me like wedding cakes, and you know, and they're very delicious in that way. And you know, of course, I always say when we're working with plaster and all that, it always looks like whipped cream to me. Of course, you can't eat it, but it looks, you know, the molding plaster looks like whipped cream. So yeah, I mean, I don't know.
So if you get hungry looking at the Connecticut Boardroom, that is a normal response according to the professional here in the building. All right. Well, thank you, Patrick, so much for taking time out of your day to share this with us. I've loved watching this project come to an end, and I can't believe how it must have felt watching it come to an end after a decade of work.
Oh, I was very happy.
So thank you, everyone, for joining us. We're just about to announce a bunch of stuff coming up in October. If you're in the area this Saturday and next Thursday, we're having a special day in the museum for families. We're just going to be setting up some activities for young children to come and color and play in the museum, and maybe take a tour if they'd like to. I think it's going to be really fun. Like I said, a ton of stuff coming up in October. Some great Tuesday talks coming up from the end of the year. Some really cool scholars from outside of the museum, and then our final Tuesday talk of the year in December. So keep a watch on our Facebook page, on our website. Sign up for our notifications if you can. And if you have any questions about today or anything you'd want to share, you can go to museum@dar.org and leave your comments, your questions, and we get back to you as soon as we can. We love hearing follow-ups from the Tuesday talk. So thank you, Patrick. Thank you, everyone, for showing up for the rest of your day.